flip-flops on bringing down the government. Now he will not bring down the government. He will support something that responds to Trump's tariffs before he brings down the government, which doesn't make any kind of sense at all. But okay, fine, whatever. Trump signs on executive order on anti-Semitism. I've long said that they're going to use anti-Semitism as a mechanism to bring in speech controls, and it looks like Trump's following that plan too. Shocking. I'm shocked. Trump responds to BRICS in a strong way where Biden ignored it, and 'twas the night before tariffs. And I asked ChatGPT to write me a poem about it, and it was silly, but it made me laugh. Regardless, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it, and we are going to start at tariffs. And Mark says Howard Lutnick on January 29th, just a few days ago, and I highlighted it when it happened, said Canada can avoid the 25% tariffs before Saturday's deadline if we just secure the border. What is our government saying? Dollar for dollar counter tariffs? Does anyone else think this is a liberal NDP strategy to stay in power or just incompetence? I'm concerned that it's a liberal NDP plan to stay in power. B. Ross says LeBlanc text a 3-minute video to Lutnick to try and stave off tariffs. Trump isn't the villain. It's our pathetic federal government. Yes. I don't know that a 3-minute video is going to be the thing that does it, right? It's like, you get a desperate TikTok from that girl you dumped, right? Or that boy you dumped, right? Same thing. So I don't know, man. It seems desperate, and it doesn't seem like that's the thing that's going to do it. Secure the border, stop the drugs. That might do it, right? Big arrests, news about big arrests, that kind of stuff, right? People being deported because of their being fentanyl dealers or scientists or whatever, like the guy in Breaking Bad, all of that might do it. But TikTok videos, 3-minute videos about how awesome our trade relationship is, just ignore that border and those drugs that we keep sending over. I don't think so. An act of quiet diplomacy. I thought it was going to say quiet desperation. Finance minister sends short video to key Trump insider, right? Canada's latest weapon. Oh, if this is our weapon, man, Jeepers Creepers, we have brought a butter knife to a gunfight. And fending off a potential trade war with the United States is a 3-minute border security video delivered in an act of quiet diplomacy, desperation. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who also maintains responsibility for border security and chairs the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations, texted a video to U.S. President Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary nominee Howard Lutnick on Wednesday evening, CTV News has learned. LeBlanc and Lutnick met at Mar-a-Lago on November 29th when he and Prime Minister Trudeau flew to Florida for an unannounced dinner with Trump at the golf course. According to a source who has seen the video and is not authorized to speak about it, the video is only being shared with Lutnick and not any other American official. It's up to Lutnick to decide what to do with it and to share it if he wants, the source says. During his confirmation hearing Wednesday, Lutnick detailed a 2-stage tariff plan with a broader round of tariffs in the spring. In his testimony before the U.S. Senate, Lutnick said Canada could avoid the first round of tariffs, which could be imposed as soon as February 1st if Canada addressed illegal migration and fentanyl at the border. The video shared to Lutnick is the latest effort by Canadian officials to demonstrate Canada is bolstering the border. And it's the drugs. I think it comes down to the drugs. Trump has been very clear when he speaks about it. He's very, emotional is not the right word, but he's very emphatic about the drugs. He didn't want, USMCA, I think, would hold today if we didn't have drugs and illegals flooding in from Canada. Honestly, I don't think that he'd bother with Canada. He'd fix Mexico. He'd use tariffs for that because we had an agreement, but the agreement had a rider in it, or an extra piece of whatever. There was an agreement. It was a part of the agreement that said, if you engage in sending illegals or drugs over the border, we're going to tariff you. And it's notable that Danielle Smith is the only one talking about actually doing what Donald Trump is asking. And instead of talking about counter tariffs, talking about how can we do what he's asking us to do? Because it's a very, very legitimate ask. It's not crazy, right? He's not asking us to put our shoe on our head. We can secure our border. We used to secure our border. Let's do it. Right? Sean says the Canadian people are saying it. The U.S. government is saying it. Danielle Smith is saying it. Secure the border to avoid tariffs. It's that simple. The drugs. Stop the drugs. And the fact that the current government is prepping for a tariff war, openly bragging about how serious they are, proves that they want it. The Liberals know what needs to be done to avoid it. Problem is, the Liberal Party doesn't want to avoid it. They want it. It's all part of the bigger plan to delay the election and stay in power longer to buy support. Prove me wrong. I think that's kind of... they're going to try to use it that way. And it seems like they're bold enough to go through with the plan and say, stop us, basically. Here's Danielle Smith.
Today, U.S. President Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary nominee, Howard Lutnick, stated during his confirmation hearing that, quote, "If we are your biggest trading partner, show us the respect, shut your border. This is a separate tariff to create action from Mexico and action from Canada. As far as I know, they are acting swiftly, and if they execute it, there will be no tariff. And if they don't, then there will be." Let me say it again. The one thing that we can do this week, in just the next couple of days, to have the best chance to avoid tariffs is to show clear and unequivocal action to secure the border. This should start with the appointment of a Canadian border czar to work with the new American border czar to jointly crack down hard on fentanyl and illegal migrants. Is this likely to end the threat of tariffs entirely? I don't think so. I think there will be other things that we will need to work on, and we will do so. But I am convinced, after speaking with dozens of elected U.S. representatives, administration officials, and the president himself, that this is the most important first step. Today, I reiterated this to the premiers, Minister LeBlanc, Minister Wilkinson, and Prime Minister Trudeau, and I hope it is acted on by the end of this week before February 1st.
So we're at the beginning of Friday for me, right? It's not 10 o'clock yet, so there's still time to do something. But you know what's a quick litmus test if you're the president of the United States? After sending your last mean tweet at 10 to 1 in the morning, you get up to start your day at 3:30 in the morning, and you ask to somebody, who's around, who works for you, has Canada recalled Parliament to do anything about the border yet? And the answer has been always no. Always no. That's a quick litmus test to, am I going to enable the border, the tariffs on Canada? Yes. If no, then answer is going to be yes. And sure, like the premiers have a lot of leverage to do a bunch of stuff, but Canada hasn't done anything really about anything, hasn't responded at the parliamentary level, period, to Trump at all, right? Because it's been prorogued since he's been in office. And so, more fool us. Canada is taking opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. We got a reprieve on January 20th. We did. And Trump said, okay, it won't be today, but it'll be February 1st, I think. And in response, Canada did nothing. We did absolutely nothing. And so, there are things that Canada has done, sure, like the premiers, as I've said. Ford has threatened a trade war with Trump, saying, we'll cut off your electricity. And Marco Rubio has rejected that. I'll show you that video. But Danielle Smith's taken it seriously, and it seems like she's going to avoid tariffs. Oil and gas won't be tariffed anyway. So there's all sorts of interesting things shaping up. But we've had the opportunity, and we have not taken that opportunity. And if you were the president of the United States, what would your short litmus test of have they taken my threats seriously today be? I think, have they got together with their government and talked about it? Because that's probably step one in doing a response that's worth anything, right? Like, is that way outside of left field? Like, Justin Trudeau campaigning is not taking this seriously? Oh, I'm shocked. Doug Ford, playing the strong man, is responding to Josh. Josh says, Trump tells reporters in the Oval Office, this is 17 hours ago, that he'll be proceeding with the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico per Gardner Kayla. They're two of the biggest U.S. trading partners. Both have pledged a response. Doug Ford says, President Trump is hell-bent on undermining Canada. What are our fentanyl numbers like, Doug? The federal government needs to be ready to immediately implement a strong and forceful response, dollar for dollar, tariff for tariff. Canada won't start this fight, but we have to be ready to win it. So, at what point do at what point does somebody judge you so out of touch with reality that you can't be the premier anymore? I don't think there's a configuration where Canada wins the trade war against the United States. I don't think there is. I think if you piss Donald Trump off, there's a configuration where Canada loses bigly. Right? Like, we could lose, or we could lose bigly. And I think maybe doing crap like this is on the path to losing bigly. Here's Miss Fee. She says, you're a disgrace. Canada will not win a trade war with the United States. You should be encouraging the feds to close our borders, stop the flow of drugs and human trafficking, and pay our fair share in NATO. Yeah, like all of the times that he's asked that, Donald Trump has asked that and said, Canada's not paying enough. We pay for their defense. It's a disgrace that we pay for their defense. We got free dental care on the backs of the United States citizens paying for our defense. Cool. We could have defended our Arctic borders. But no, that was That's too difficult. We can't buy ships. That's crazy, right? So no, we won't do that. We'll give people free dental care paid for by your tax dollars. It's ridiculous. Frank Grimes is responding as well. This is not winning, Doug Ford. This is hurting Canadian citizens. The joke is on us. The results of politicians not doing their job. Trump is flexing the muscle you get to flex as such a big country. Give him what he wants on the border. Make him feel like he got to win. Negotiate. These things, yeah, like don't act like a buffoon. You don't hold all the cards, right? Like it kind of is obvious to everybody but Doug Ford. Juniper says, sounds like Trump just announced 25% tariffs to Canada as of Saturday. That's tomorrow. He clarified that oil and gas will not be included. So, phew, right? So, but like still not great. I don't know if that's true. So I've heard conflicting reports, but I think it was just outdated. I think the tweet I saw was time-wise before this tweet, so I discounted it. But as the day goes on, I'm going to firm this up, and I'll have a firmer report for you tomorrow. But this is early days yet, and it looks like that's what's going to be going on, unless a last-ditch effort is like manifests today. But like I would be shit shocked, because I think they're going to bring back Parliament to respond to Trump's tariffs by doing big bailouts. They're not going to do anything to close the border. They're not going to do anything to stop the drugs. Both of those things are what they need to do, but instead they're going to use their parliamentary maneuvering time to try and hurt Canada's economy, really. They're going to say we're saving it, but it's going to be inflationary, and it's not going to save it. It's not going to fix anything, right? They're not going to try and fix the problem with Trump. They're going to use it to stay in power. I hope I'm wrong about that. TD Leaker says, fascinating read below about how OMFG Canada is. Canada is now a mature narco state, just like Mexico. The government got their heads so far up their bums that they can't see daylight. And what do they do about any of this? Absolutely nothing. So this is 2 threads by Stephen. And this addresses, yesterday I expressed skepticism because Mel Jolie said Canada represents less than 1% of the fentanyl seizures at the border, something to that effect. And ergo, Canada is not the problem. The problem is Mexico, and we shouldn't be subject to these tariffs. We're not even going to address the drug problem because it's such a small problem. Donald Trump is delusional. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So we're going to address the issues that we can identify and ignore the things that Donald Trump is delusional about. That's kind of the read that I'm getting from them. But here's Stephen, and Stephen is explaining the flaw with the 1% number and why they know it's a lie. So here's Stephen. He says, Canada's public safety minister just said less than 1% of the United States fentanyl is from Canada, and ditto for illegal immigrants. Here's why that's a whopper of a lie. Warning, your opinion of Canada will irreversibly change. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, because you've been watching this show, your opinion of Canada has probably changed. Stephen says, last year, the United States border seized 19.6 kilograms of fentanyl, or excuse me, 19.6 pounds of fentanyl. That doesn't seem right. That seems low. 19 pounds? But maybe that is correct. Canada busts in Q4, a lab in BC was producing 4% of that volume per year. A lab in Alberta produced 1% of that volume. In Canada, just these 4 busts in Q4 represent over $1 billion in drug profits. So here is RCMP bust drugs super lab seized $485 million in fentanyl and meth, and it says BC RCMP say officers have taken down Canada's largest, most sophisticated drug super lab. Police seized drugs and drug materials worth almost $500 million and 30,000 kilograms of, see, they're kilograms, it's not pounds, it's kilograms. 30,000 kilograms of chemicals seized in massive Enderbury drug production bust. RCMP say the chemicals could have been used to produce hundreds of kilograms of meth. Stolen skids steer also seized. And this is from October 3rd, 2024. 16 individuals charged in connection with drug trafficking. This is from November 5th. And I don't know, it says it's in Quebec. And Merchants of Death, top player in Alberta's largest ever fentanyl lab case, sentenced to 16 years. This is January 28th, 2025. Police say they seized 31 kilograms of fentanyl, kilograms, not pounds, of fentanyl and its precursors, as well as 7,600 kilograms of chemicals used in fentanyl production. The estimated street value is calculated at $300 million. So there's a huge amount of drugs being produced in Canada, and that's being transported by truckers, foreign truckers usually. Stephen continues, I doubt there was a handcrafted I doubt that was handcrafted artisanal fentanyl destined for sale at local farmers markets. Canada has been well aware of this for decades. The DEA alleged that El Chapo stated Canada was more lucrative than the United States and sent a lieutenant as a student. And then he says, quick sidebar on immigration. Canada claims it has a robust screening, but anyone that shows up could get a student visa with an acceptance letter until last year. No background checks. The letter was never verified. Back to fentanyl. I'm not a housing guy by trade. My team fell into housing when we were confused by Vancouver real estate prices. I'm actually a quant by training that specializes in tracking capital flows, legal or otherwise. Money is zero sum, so there's always a source. When we crunched the numbers back in 2016-17, we identified one party, an organized crime group that stopped laundering in its traditional region. The flows were too similar to ignore. We published it. Facebook banned it. Old Twitter wouldn't even let it pass on direct messages. After being branded a racist, I get a call from the former director of the RCMP who's dumbfounded by the fact that we nailed it right down to the gang. Scott Cooper dug and uncovered the Vancouver model. Yes, a money laundering model that's named after a city in Canada. We're so desensitized to the whole thing, right? Like we've known about the Vancouver model for a long time. Stephen says the Vancouver model is simple. Drug money is traded for casino chips. Cash out with a casino check, deposit tax-free winnings at a bank, buy a house with the proceeds, and pay the mortgage with rent. Repeat. Guys went to the high roller tables with grocery bags of cash. So Canadian authority, yeah, and so the Vancouver method was very effective, right? And probably still works now. Steven says, fun side note, Cooper did an interview with a person on my staff describing the inquiry and the Vancouver model. Facebook immediately banned everyone at my company, and I was labeled a critic of China despite me not saying anything. Shout out to the American billionaire who fixed it. So that's Elon Musk, I think. Steven says, money laundering is like cockroaches. A place doesn't just have one, so it was time to look at the Greater Toronto real estate. The fine folks at Transparency International let me help with a study where we found $25.4 billion in mortgages with blatant laundering flags and anonymous ownership. The politicians pretended to crack down, but then generated liquidity. Their primary concern wasn't laundering, but a bust pushing prices down. Toronto went on to become the fentanyl control center of the world, according to the United States under Biden. So that's pretty interesting. How corrupt is Canada? One of the world's biggest fentanyl dealers was running his operation using a prison mail system. That would be absurd in Jails Co., but it didn't even make the news in Canada. I wonder why. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even hear about it. So Stephen's talking about it in a thread here that I don't want to get waylaid on. We'll continue. Most folks don't know Canada's government orders media bans preventing discussion of a case. A recent case involving the RCMP director of Intel, Canada's FBI, the Five Eyes director allegedly leaked to a kingpin launderer representing Sinaloa cartel and terror organization. Speaking of the cartel, guess who their banker is? Good old Toronto Dominion Bank. Yay! They recently paid the largest penalty of its kind in American history. That's an accomplishment, and I think that was under Biden, but I could be wrong. I think it was under Biden. If it was in 24, it was under Biden, right? Or before. Unless it was before 2020. Anyway, Stephen continues, speaking of laundromats, HSBC Canada was recently acquired by RBC with odd terms, such as lending to the small group of developers in BC. The finance minister at the time must have forgotten they were under investigation at the time of the rushed exit. So weird. That's a lot about BC, but what about Ontario? To start, we know casinos were used for the same reason. Why? Canada was told by an intel agency that the world's largest car theft gang arrived and is using casinos. Canada ignores it. Goes on to become a car theft capital. Sense a trend? Yep. After pressures to improve AML, Canada hit casinos with new reporting regulations. Surely this will catch the laundering in Ontario, right? Funny story, a regulator hit casino with an allegation and whoops, the AML reporting system for casinos went offline for 6 months. Darn. Shucks darn, right? Stephen continues, when places have low statistical corruption, it's because it has low corruption or it's too corrupt to even try enforcing. Ontario resembles the latter when it comes to drugs. No major drug lab busts, but the United States seems to arrest a lot of smugglers from Ontario. So here's a couple of examples. Illinois police nabbed 2 Ontario men with cocaine worth $40 million in a truck. Canadian trucker nabbed with 16 million cocaine load at border. Brampton trucker arrested after $6.5 million worth of cocaine seized at the Canadian border. Ontario truck driver arrested on drug charges at the border. So there's some of them, but it doesn't seem like that's the majority. Stephen says, if you're starting to think that there's something wrong with Canada's government feels the same way. The country's organized crime intelligence unit estimates 1 in 4,000 adults in Canada are organized crime, and 260 organized crime groups work in government. Like they're infiltrating government. I think that's what it means. Let's gloss over the fact that Australia's largest fentanyl bust was a shipment recently being smuggled from Canada. Granted, it wasn't as stylish as Canada's coke meth in the vintage Bentley that occurred a few days later. I will admit Canada provides less than 1% of the United States illegal immigrants. However, when it comes to supervillains, Canada is the undisputed champ. The United States border encounters with suspected terrorists are 500% higher on the Canadian border versus the Mexico border. 1% of illegals, 80% terrorist suspects. Which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Remember those launderers above, they launder for terrorists and drug dealers and businesses booming. Canada has a strange history as a major terror hub, like the time CSIS destroyed evidence it had someone on the Air India bombing. So, yeah. There's a bit more here, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. There's very interesting and concerning issues surrounding what Canada is doing with the drugs, Vancouver method, allowing the Vancouver method to happen, allowing people to come in and become car theft rings, to use money laundering methods and things like that. And just it's wild to have it laid out. And when you put it like that, does any of that seem fixed, right? Like we've still got a catch and release criminal system. It doesn't seem like anything's moved at all, right? And they say, oh, we're fixing it. Mark Carney's going to fix it. We're going to change things and everybody's going to have so much confidence and blah, 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 blah. Bull poop. I am not confident. Here's a little bit of a tighter thread from Stephen as well. Talking about the 1% lie as well. He says neither Canada and the U.S. are saying, or he's talking about the drugs at the border a little tighter. He says neither Canada and the U.S. are saying what the drug border conflict is about out loud, so I guess I'll do it. This is about Canada's trucking industry and Ontario's truck driving schools that popped up overnight. Quick thread. First of all, you've probably seen this chart making the rounds proving that Canada isn't a big source of drugs in the United States. When I talk stats, I always tell people to take careful note of what it's showing. In this case, it's drug seizures on the Canada and Mexico border, straightforward. So drug seizures on the Mexico border, much higher than Canada, right? So Mexico is the problem, not Canada, right? And Stephen says, if you're in the United States, you've probably been reading stories like this. Take note of where these truckers are being arrested. It's not at the border. Just one of these busts was 6% of the volume of drugs seized at the border, but obviously wouldn't be in the border data. So the statistic is being massaged because these truckers are getting arrested in the States, right? And so Canadian trucker arrested after 123.9 kilogram bust in Indiana. And there's other ones here. Interstate 94 having his truck weighed, he's arrested there. Canada and the United States have arguably the closest trade relationship of any two countries. Every day, $3.5 billion in goods flows through back and forth with an average of 13.7 thousand trucks crossing per day. That's a lot of trucks and nearly impossible to screen it all. As a result, a high degree of trust is granted to logistics companies, especially bonded and trusted firms. Companies like FedEx need to move materials really fast. It used to be hard to become a cross-border trucker since companies don't want to risk hiring a smuggler. In 2019, Ontario snuck in legislation to lower regulations to make private career colleges. Then, with the help of government-owned joint venture firm no one knows, our government our government's own. They combined rural parts of developed countries to drum up business for colleges that popped up overnight. Trucking was huge. Between 2017 and 2024, Ontario went from 80 truck driving schools to 280. The province has 6 auditors for 600 private career colleges, almost half for trucks apparently. No enforcement standards. The industry thinks it's absurd. As you might have guessed, that's a really bad combination. CBC Marketplace did an investigation recently where they tried to buy a truck driver's certification, and the person threatens to set them on fire when they try to back out of the deal. Yeah, this was pretty crazy stuff, really. It's also important to remember that Canada had no checks or balances for its study program, no background checks or school verification. Just show up at the airport with proof of funds and a letter that they won't verify. That's it. That's how it worked until last year. To recap, money laundering capital of the world, no school regulations, criminals run certifications, desperate folks from developing countries with no standard of entry, no scrutiny for cross-border traffic. Still surprising that this is happening? Anyway, I guess there's 2 morals to this story. Statistics in the hands of someone that doesn't understand them is more dangerous than a shotgun, and Canada is more likely to freeze a trucker's bank account for honking than being a transnational fentanyl smuggler. That's a good payoff. That's a good way to end that thread. So it's about the drugs, stupid, right? Jeepers creepers. And we're already half an hour in. I've taken way too long on this. Police say that they seized 31 kilograms of fentanyl and its precursors, as well as 7,600 kilograms of chemicals used in fentanyl production. The estimated street value was calculated at $300 million. Merchants of death. This is January 28th. We're doing all we can on the border, says Canada. Are we? Rex Glacier says, just like magic, police are finding drugs since Trump was elected. I don't know if this is the same one. RCMP seized fentanyl bound for Regina that was potentially millions of doses. I don't know if it's the same one, but is it 300 million? Where's the number? Anyway, but more news about this whole thing. It's very interesting. Here's a long thread. A long kind of blog post. I'm just going to read a bit of it. He says, over and over, Trump and his team have been making it crystal clear for 2 months now that tariffs are the punishment if the Trudeau government refuses to deal with the border based on the 2023 stats, which showed that nearly 20,000 people illegally crossed the Canadian border into the U.S., including 308 people on the U.S. terrorist watch list. These are the folks that the U.S. caught. Who knows how many escaped capture or detection. It's a massive increase since 2015. Terrorists caught coming from Canada are 300% higher than from Mexico. That's nothing short of stunning. Equally important is the amount of fentanyl coming out of our side of the border into the United States, which has also seen a dramatic increase as the cartels continue to increase their presence in remote regions of British Columbia, take advantage of lax laws associated with importing bulk precursor chemicals from China, and then using multiple smuggling routes via Alberta and British Columbia into their distribution chains in Montana and Washington state. Taking this concern seriously would have been simple, cheap, and beneficial to Canada because not all of the fentanyl goes south. A lot of it ends up in cities across Western Canada with costly and deadly effects. A tighter Canadian border would also help reduce the number of handguns coming from the United States that make Toronto and Montreal gangs stronger, richer, and more dangerous than ever. If we got our act together, it would be a lot easier to demand reciprocity from the Americans on the gun issue, but instead of taking the easy path towards avoiding tariffs and making both our countries safer, Justin Trudeau saw a political opportunity to gain advantage over Pierre Poilievre. So yeah, there's history there. So this is not a new issue whatsoever. And further, Danielle Smith's talking about the border czar. She says federal government needs to appoint a credible border czar to work directly with the United States administration on securing our shared borders from fentanyl dealers and illegal migrants as we need it announced before February 1st. TikTok, I don't think it's going to happen. Tom Quiggin wants to be the border czar. He says, please read and repost this everywhere. He says, if Canada wants to create a border czar position as per Premier Smith, I would go to work for that person for the fee of $1. I have worked extensively in the intelligence community in Canada, the United States, Singapore, and the Netherlands over a period of 40 years. He says, I'm also a court expert on terrorism, so he's got lots of credentials. I've authored all these books, he says. Within 1 week, I could produce a comprehensive program for Canada which would satisfy the demands of the United States Department and intelligence community as they relate to the demands of President Trump and his border tariffs. This specifically refers to terrorism aspects of Islamists and the Iranians. It would also cover the Khalistanis and other lesser groups. Combined with Sam Cooper and Andy Lee's work on China and fentanyl, an effective response response to the U.S. demands could be created in a brief period, although the larger program to address all American concerns about deep-rooted terrorism and Chinese influence, fentanyl, could be created in under 2 weeks. My belief is that the government of Canada has the ability, but not necessarily the will, to create such a response. To effectively address such issues, the government of Canada would have to purge itself of foreign influence. It remains to be seen if Canada are willing to put the requirements of the country over and above their own political will and interests of the Liberal Party. So, yeah, interesting that Tom Quiggin wants to do it. Danielle Smith went and talked to Newsmax, and she's talking here. She's trying to sell here, and I mean, makes sense. Might as well take the opportunity. Where Doug Ford snipes and tries to inflame, Danielle Smith is trying to calm things down and, I don't know, move the conversation to a beneficial thing. It's a pivot a bit. Here we go.
As we have 1 trillion barrels of oil in place, of which 200 billion barrels are recoverable. And we also have about 500 trillion cubic feet of gas. We surpassed Saudi Arabia in 2014 as the largest exporter to the United States, most of that coming from my province of Alberta. And we'd like to sell more. There was a concept that the president first signed on 2 years ago of Keystone XL, which would have taken our particular grade of heavy oil and connected it with the heavy oil refineries in Texas. And we'd like to restart that conversation.
Oh, yeah.
We don't feel that we're in competition with the U.S. You've got a different grade, and your refineries need our particular grade of heavy oil.
Well, I know that when a lot of conservatives talk or hear Donald Trump.
We'll leave it there. It's 7 minutes, I think. Yes, almost 8 minutes. So, and we're going long today, I guess. True North says it would hurt them as well. This is on a response from Marco Rubio to Doug Ford's threats of cutting off energy.
What are the risks to us? Because you've got the Premier of Ontario saying we can't bring a knife to a gunfight here. If they're going to do this to us with these tariffs, we got to fight back the same way. We supply them with a bunch of electricity. Let's shut it down. So can Canada shut our lights off?
Well, then who would they be selling it to? Where else would they send that electricity? I mean, it would hurt them as well. They would have no market to sell it to.
We have to ground that energy out. Like doing that, I think, harms the grid somehow. It's better for it to flow through power lines than it is to ground out. Although I don't know the logistics of all of that. I just heard somebody talking about it. So I don't know. It's interesting. Here's Legault, and Gov.exe says Francois Legault says he spoke to Justin Trudeau and has been assured that Quebec will receive financial support from the federal government to offset the economic impact of a trade war with the United States. Wah, right? Like, I'm not convinced that this is the best thing for Canada. Melissa says, OMG, Canada's media is now proposing that we ditch our U.S. partnership and Canada join the EU, the European Union. Yay. So Toronto Star says Donald Trump is driving a wedge between Canada and the United States. Could we join the EU? I mean, do you not understand logistics at all? Like, wow. Here is True North. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey says that he supports a federal COVID-style workers' relief program and goes on to praise Justin Trudeau for his government's response to COVID. And, well, we're not in COVID, and this whole thing is insane, and we should be talking about how we can fix Donald Trump's problem with our border, and actually it is actually a real problem that Canadians want addressed as well. Here's Melissa M, and she says, I can appreciate the support for the energy sector. She's responding to Jonathan Wilkinson, who's the Minister for Innovation, I think, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. And he says tariffs will make Canadian and American lives more expensive, but our abundant national resources offer a better path. Let's team up to make North America the safest, most prosperous continent in the world. These guys wrecked our country, and they don't want to build energy. Like, I'm very skeptical. So she says, Melissa says, I appreciate your support for the energy sector and the urgency to get projects built, but where was the support for the last 9 years? Yeah, like, you're coming out of the woodwork now to say, oh yeah, energy's great. Global News says the city of Surrey has joined a number of other Canadian cities that border the United States to prepare for U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats. And I said, what, are they doing apprentice marathons? Like, honestly. Preparing for the threats. Oh, guys, hunker down. Here's where the bunkers are. Ryan says different food items at Costco go up weekly in price now. It's insane. You can go 1 week and the next it's gone up another $1 or $2. This is unsustainable. Yeah, buckle up. It's pretty wild stuff. Here is Doug Ford. He says, let's talk about the election in Ontario. And there isn't another option. I'm pretty confident Doug Ford's going to win unless his party implodes completely. And so I think that it's interesting that this is what's going on, but I don't know that there's anybody who's challenging him. Here we go.
Trump's tariffs will hit every part of our economy, but there's a bullet aimed straight at the heart of our auto sector. We'll do whatever it takes to protect workers and their livelihoods. As part of our plan to protect Ontario and to protect Ontario workers, I'm prepared to invest another $1 billion in the Skills Development Fund on top of the $1.5 billion that's already helping to train 1 million workers, to urgently expand union training centers, to help workers gain the skills they need to find high-demand jobs in the skilled trades. Trump's tariffs...
I don't know. It seems, why isn't he saying we're going to shut down the trucking schools? We're going to increase the fines for smuggling drugs across the border. Why isn't he addressing those kind of things? Does he not know? I could understand maybe if he didn't know, but if he knows, why isn't he addressing it? Seems stupid. Here's Derek Sloan and Randy Hillier. As I was saying, I don't know, where have they been for the last, since 2021? When did Doug Ford win? Whatever year the last Ontario election was. Where have these guys been? When do they do rallies? How many people are on board with their party? Here we go.
3 years ago, Canadians rallied together to take back their livelihoods and their freedoms. Two corrupt lawmen, Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau, had taken our freedoms and our livelihoods away. But we got together during those cold days of February 2022 with the truckers from across this country, and we stood together and we won. We took them back. Doug Ford and the Liberal Party are threatening our futures, our children's future, and our livelihoods and our freedoms once again. Instead of fixing our failed, disastrous, and harmful immigration policies and fixing our borders, they've decided to get into a trade war with Donald Trump. Not to help the people in Ontario or Canada, but to protect their own jobs. Doug Ford is also facing a criminal investigation where he tried to enrich his friends with the Greenbelt deal.
After a 6-month investigation last year, Ontario's Auditor General revealed that developers were allowed to influence government policy that eventually removed their lands from
these.
I'm just going to jump ahead a bit.
Corrupt political parties. I've joined with Derek Sloan, leader of the Ontario Party, and together with you, we will reclaim and take back Ontario. Join us at ontarioparty.ca. You can volunteer, buy a membership, help us out, and if you want to be a candidate and help take Ontario back, send an email to me, info@randyhillier.com, and together we will take Ontario back from these corrupt political parties.
They are corrupt. I agree. Where you guys been, man? Rex Glacier. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful